Hello Year 4, how are you? Today in geography we're going to be looking more about rainforests. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the structure of a rainforest, looking at how the vegetation in a rainforest is structured. Now, if you're not sure what that word vegetation means, don't worry, we'll be explaining more of that just before we get into today's lesson. But by the end of today's lesson, you will be able to explain why tropical rainforests are hot and why they're humid. You will be able to identify the different layers of vegetation that are found in the rainforest. And not only that, you'll be able to explain how each of the layers in the rainforest are different in terms of their temperature, the humidity, the sunshine, and also the different plants and animals that can be found there. So I've just got some retrieval questions for you to start with. Now here is a picture of a tree. I would like you to decide and write down, is this an example of a deciduous or a coniferous tree? And explain how you know using the word because, okay? Pause the video and have a think and write down your thoughts, please. Off you go. Okay, you would have noticed that it is a deciduous tree, and the reason how you know that is because it's growing out rather than up like a triangle. You can see that it's got leaves, not needle-like leaves that don't fall off, and you can see it looks like a tree that we actually know that leaves do fall off it. So that is how we know it's a deciduous tree. Well done if you got that one right. A second retrieval question today then. This is a diagram showing you the water cycle. So this explains why tropical rainforests are so hot but also so wet. Can you remember from last lesson? Can you explain what is happening in this diagram? Pause the video and have a bit of a chat if there's someone sitting next to you, or just have a think about it, please. Off you go. Okay, so you may have said that when it rains in the rainforest, the water collects in the canopy. Now the canopy is one layer of the rainforest that you're going to learn about today, and not much of it reaches the forest floor. And when it gets really, really hot, the sun heats the rain up and makes it evaporate. Plants in the canopy also release this water vapour that has been made from the sun and the rain through a process called transpiration, which is where the water vapour moves through the plants. Then the water vapour from both the rainwater and the heat and the sun heated up, but also the plant vapour and this process of transpiration condenses the vapour into the clouds as the environment cools. And when the water vapour in the clouds has cooled enough, it turns into rain and the whole process begins again. Okay. So this word vegetation is going to be spoke about quite a lot in today's lesson. And this word vegetation means the plant life of a region or the plant community. So you can see here that it looks like lots of different plants, and that's what it is. Vegetation is the plant life, the amount of plants, the types of plants that are in a different region or an area. In a sentence, we might say, we walked through the thick vegetation near the river. So they might have to walk through lots of different plants to get to the river. Okay, so you're going to be hearing that word quite a lot today. So let's have a look what today's lesson is going to be all about. I would like you to first imagine you travel to the rainforest to do some exploring. What do you think the temperature would be like? What do you think you'd see when you got there? And what do you think it would be like? Pause the video and have a think and a bit of a chat if you're lucky enough to have your grown-up next to you, please. Off you go. Okay, so you might have said that you might have a very hot experience in a tropical rainforest. It's quite hot and humid, a tropical rainforest. We learnt that last lesson is because of where they are. Because we know that they lie near the equator, in between two tropics. Can you remember what those two tropics are? Well done, the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. The equator is in the middle, and the equator is one of the warmest places in the world. So that is why the tropical rainforests are so hot. But as well as that, you might have also said that actually, if I went to a rainforest, it would be raining most of the time because they have about 250 centimetres of rainfall a year, and that happens almost every day. So if you went to explore the rainforest, you probably feel very hot and very sticky. It's very humid, but very wet too. Now, this hot and humid weather makes it a perfect environment for plants to grow. Because we know, thinking about our topic from last term, all about living things, that plants need heat and water to grow. So being in a rainforest helps them to grow, okay? It also makes it perfect for animals too, because we know from looking at our food chains, not only can plants survive in the rainforest, but actually helps animals too, because the plants can live in and also feed from the plants. Now, rainforests are home to thousands of species of plants and thousands of species of animals. So lots and lots of different types of plants and different animals are in the rainforest. Now, where these plants and animals can be found in the rainforest depends on which layer they are in, because each layer of a rainforest is different, and that's what we're going to be exploring today. So I want you to look at these two pictures on the slide now. What do you notice about all the plants in the rainforest? Are they all the same height? Are they all the same shade of green? Do they all have the same kinds of leaves, the same shapes? Pause the video and have a think, please. Okay, well, you might have noticed, some plants are higher than the others, some plants are quite low, whereas some plants are quite high. Some plants are a dark green, some plants are a light green. Some plants have different shaped leaves, spiky leaves, larger leaves, smaller leaves. Why do you think they're all different? You might think they're all different because they're found in different areas of the rainforest, and if you think that, you're absolutely correct, because each layer of the rainforest has different plants and different animals. So there are lots of different layers of vegetation in the rainforest, and each of these layers, and they're also called stratas, but we're going to probably refer to them as layers more than that, has different temperatures, different levels of humidity and different sunshine levels, but also lots of different plants and animals live there. Because you can see that some of the plants that are at the bottom are different to the plants that are in the middle and different to the plants that are at the top. So, this is a diagram of the layers of the rainforest. So you can see that right at the top here is the emergent layer. In the middle-ish area is the canopy. Next, we have the understory, and right on the bottom of the rainforest is the forest floor. I just want you to have a think. What do you think the temperature of each of these layers might be like? Do you think it would be the same temperature in each of the layers? What animals or plants do you think are going to be in the emergent layer? What animals do you think are going to be on the forest floor? Can you just take 2 minutes to have a think about those questions? Have a think, see if you can make some predictions about what you think are going to be found in those areas of the rainforest. Pause the video and have a think, please. Okay, let's see if your predictions were correct. So we are going to start with the emergent layer. The emergent layer is right at the top of the rainforest. And the emergent layer is the tallest layer. There are only a few trees compared to the canopy, which is why in your water cycle all the water drops on the canopy rather than the emergent layer, because there aren't as many trees in the emergent layer, but they can grow between 40 and 80 metres tall. So if you think of our meter stick, turn it this way, 40 and 80 of our meter sticks is as tall as the emergent layer. They're known as forest giants because they are the tallest part of the forest, but they do have thin trunks and weak roots. But because they are above all of the other trees in the forest, they have more light and more room to grow. So these weak roots don't really bother them or damage them because they do have that room and the light to grow. And you'll see the difference between the other layers as well. Now, in the emergent layer are usually trees which have broad leaves or evergreen hardwood trees. Although there's lots of sunlight in the emergent layer, it's also very cold and windy. And this is why these trees in the emergent layer have very thick leaves to help protect them from the wind. Because if the wind is hitting them so much, what do you think might happen to the leaves? They might blow off, and then obviously the animals won't be able to have the leaves for a shelter over them, and it might be a bit of a disaster. So there aren't many animals that live in the emergent layer, but most of them are birds, monkeys, bats and butterflies. Why do you think these animals might live in the emergent layer? That's right, because they can fly, or monkeys can climb really high. So that means that they can get up to this area, but not a lot of animals can because it's so high, because it's 40 to 80 metres high. And here's an example of that. Okay, the next layer down, so we've got the emergent layer, then the canopy. So if we remember, the canopy is that area where in the water cycle, all the rain from the clouds gathers in the canopy, because you will find out how big the canopy is. Now, trees in this layer are that crowded and that bushed together that they actually form a roof over everything below them. And the canopy is made up of the leaves and the branches from all the canopy trees, so they all crowd together. So you can see even here there's not many gaps in between all of the trees. And because there's not many gaps means that all the layers below don't get much sunlight because the canopy trees block it out. And it blocks out that much sunlight that it blocks out almost 90% of all the sunlight. So only 2% of sunlight anything below the canopy can see. But with this, although it doesn't get much sunlight underneath the canopy, it doesn't get much rain either, because about 80% of all the rainfall goes into the canopy because it's so thick and it's so crowded, so it stops the rainfall reaching the ground. Lots and lots of different animals live in this layer because there is plenty of food for them. So monkeys and birds, again, not only do they live in the emergent area, they also live in the canopy layer, but also orangutans, iguanas, snakes and sloths all live in this area too, and it's all due to the amount of food. Some of the plants in this canopy include trees, of course, vines, flowers and mosses too. So in this layer of the canopy, it gets the most rain gather so it can keep the water flowing. Do you remember the water vapor from traveling through the plants? Do you remember what that process was called in the water cycle? It began with a T. It's called transpiration. Well done. The process of moving the water vapor through the plants to then go back up, condense into the clouds, and it cools in the clouds and it rains again. That process, all the water will gather in the canopy. But it also stops lots of sunlight. So we've got the emergent layer, the tallest layer, the canopy layer. What's next? It is the understory layer. So we're not at the bottom yet, we're just almost at the bottom. You can see there's not many plants here, mostly trunks, and we know that it has very little sunlight because all the sunlight is trapped above the canopy. So it's very dark, it's quite a damp place because although the canopy gets most of the rain, 80% of the rain, it doesn't get all of it. So it's very dark, a very damp place. Why do you think it's a damp place? Because when we get rain, it doesn't make everything damp, but it only does for a little while. Why does it make the understory layer damp for a long time? That's right, it makes it damp for a long time because they don't have that sunlight, that heat, to dry up that rain. So it's very dark and it's very damp. And that is why you can't see many plants here. Because there's no sunlight, the plants can't grow. So the small shrubs and the trees live there, but the trees don't grow any higher than 4 meters. So if you think back to the emergent layer where trees will grow as high as maybe even 80 meters tall, they can't grow any taller than 4 meters here. And that's just because they don't have the sunlight and they don't really have much water either. And the plants have to grow larger leaves so that they can try and reach the sunlight that there's available. So of course they would reach around 4 meters, but then the plants would have to grow really big leaves to try and reach the sunlight that they have. Now lots of insects and reptiles live here, so such as bats or frogs or small mammals. And lots of the animals live in the tree trunks where pools of water collect, which is perfect for amphibians who can lay their eggs there. So although it's not a very nice place to live, the animals do try and get the water that they need, and they do try and make it their own habitat, okay? Now, I am going to talk to you about the last layer, but please head over to part 2 so you can find out all about that, and then we can go through your task for today. Super listening so far, Year 4. Great job.